Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am very excited because we have Lynn C. Miller here to discuss her book, The Unmasking, which has a phenomenal cover. We were just talking about how much I love it. And she is going to be in conversation with Francois Bereaud. And it's a mystery. I'm not going to give away anything, but it's a mystery where someone dies, which sounds like I can give you a little bit more than that. It's a professor that dies, and two girls go on a quest to find out what exactly has happened. And from them trying to figure out what is going on, many dangerous things happen at some points, and just they unravel lots of information that maybe they wanted to find out, maybe they didn't. But I will go ahead and pass it off to Francois. But before I do, this is the Vanna White section, as I like to call it. If you look down below, if you would like to ask a question, which is the best part of these events, is that we have the author and you get to ask her a question. Make sure that you ask it down below in the Ask a Question box. Try not to ask it in the chat, but the down below, ask a question. And the best way to celebrate a book is to buy it. And you can even get a personalized booklet, which is pretty freaking awesome with how the world is currently working. So if you would like to buy The Unmasking, make sure you click right down below where it says buy book and personalized bookplate. And Francois, I will go ahead and let you take it away, and I will see you guys at the end of the event.
Well, thank you very much. Let's start with Lynn introducing herself.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. And thank you so much to Constance and Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore. I'm Lynn C. Miller. This is my fourth novel and my fourth published novel. I have other novels that are in the closet, but anyway. And I'll be talking with my friend and fellow writer, Francois Bereaud.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I would characterize myself as an emerging writer, and I'm very honored to be here with you, Lynn, to discuss your wonderful novel. Let's begin with a brief summary, no spoilers, of course. In an homage to the locked room mystery, The Unmasking follows three friends who are professors, Miriam, Bettina, and Fiona, who suspect murder when their dean dies in a one-car accident after embezzling university funds. They travel to a resort in New Mexico where they join others in performing remarkable women from history, such as Gertrude Stein, Virginia Woolf, Mabel Dodge Lujan, Victoria Woodhull, and Edith Wharton. But when one woman is kidnapped and another disappears, the friends' lives are forever changed. They realize the masks we wear often hide chilling truths.
Thank you for that, Francois.
Let's begin by reading from early in the novel when we first meet Miriam and encounter her sense of unease.
Miriam Held took a farewell turn along the boardwalk that traced the inlet before heading to her car. As she clutched the brim of her straw hat against a brisk Gulf Coast breeze, an armada of white riding the choppy waters arrested her. She gripped her binoculars.
A squadron of white pelicans drifted in the current in front of the pier. Paired off 2 by 2, their heads bobbed and dipped into the water, their feet trailing, their bodies curving toward one another, their supple necks angled towards the companion bird as if inviting the other to dance. And it was a dance, a sensuous orchestration of scooped beaks and weaving torsos as they fed, filtering the rippling water through the sand of their mouths. Necks bowing, bodies curving, they glided across the water surface in a gastronomic minuet.
Miriam held her breath, afraid any movement at all might disrupt the bird's ritual. The pod of pelicans coursed in time to an invisible score. Their streaming was too sinuous to be a march, even a majestic one. Brahms, Miriam wondered, or Schubert? She leaned against the railing, a tickle of desire rising in her throat at the sight of such synchrony and grace. Had she ever seen bodies more attuned? She thought not.
As the last pair of birds floated away from her, Miriam turned to go. But in front of her, a ragged wing jutted up from the water. Then she noticed the bird's crooked neck drifting on the surface, its beak frozen, half open. A dead gull trailed the waltzing group, its feathers dirty and dull. Her spirits, soaring a mere moment ago, plummeted, and Miriam steadied herself on the handrail, imagining she saw a dark red stain in its wake. A spattering of cold rain seeped under her jacket collar, sent her hurrying for the shelter of her car.
At this point, her friend Bettina calls to tell Miriam that the festival they'd agreed to go to in New Mexico is on. After this call, the dead bird unsettled Miriam. She remembered now that she'd agreed to speak at the gathering Bettina had mentioned, and on a topic, the locked room mystery, that now also seemed alarming.
Lynn, you have a previous novel about this same group of academic friends, right? The Death of a Department Chair?
Yes. In that novel, Miriam is the chief suspect in the murder of her department chair, who used to be her lover. She investigates to find the actual perpetrator. This too recent death of a female colleague who had been attacked and left to die in her office still haunted Miriam. We'll continue on with her thoughts after the phone call with Bettina.
While many people thought of the university as cushioned from reality, Miriam knew that academia was not a safe place. The gull's broken wing and twisted neck flashed again before her eyes. The dead bird appeared as an ominous symbol.
She placed a hand on her own neck. It felt solid and a tad fleshy as usual, and very alive. But as she well knew, a person bursting with health 1 minute could be rendered lifeless the next.
I'm going to try to get to sleep tonight without that image of the dead pelican. Let's read some more from the end of a scene where the dean, before he dies, consults a psychic named Daphne about his misappropriation of university funds. She has drawn a tarot card for him.
The Tower, Daphne pronounced.
Alec giggled. Well, how appropriate, I suppose. Austin University has a rather famous tower, as you must know.
Oh, yes. I am very familiar with it. Death to the old order. Some interpreters of the card say death to the patriarchy. In ancient times, the card referenced the death of the king and the resulting chaos and shift in hierarchy. Nothing short of revolution, if you will. But of course, we always look at the cards on a rather more personal level.
I see you're something of a historian yourself, Alex said. Daphne's eyes drifted upwards, giving her face a rapt expression.
How fascinating that the AU Tower is best known for the sniper attacks over 50 years ago and for suicides. In the tarot, the tower signifies an imperative to purify one's motives and actions, for example. In all mythology, death is the ultimate purification. You see the plummeting figures. The ground under them has crumbled and they must adapt. It is essential that you choose to let go of ingrained patterns and thoughts that no longer serve you. If you do not change voluntarily, the universe will see to it for you.
If one could believe such things, Alec protested.
Daphne tapped the card. Dean Martin, you came to see me. Surely a researcher of your caliber has found out that my practice contains a strong spiritual dimension. And yet, you really don't want to hear anything I have to say. Tell me, why did you come here? For reassurance? Yes, I do have unique insight and an unusual perspective. But
oh, you froze, Lynn.
Oh, I froze. Okay.
Yeah, you froze at tell me.
Okay, tell me. Thank you. Tell me, why did you come here? For reassurance?
I've heard that you have unique insight and an unusual perspective.
Both are true. But insight offered to those with closed minds and hearts is a poor thing indeed.
Alec's fingers fumbled to release the top button of his blue Oxford cloth shirt. His tie was positively choking him. What was the temperature in this infernal room? I just need to know, can I do this? Is my investment safe? Are my ambitions reasonable?
Daphne scooped up the cards from the table. You mean, dear Dean, will you be caught? I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place for that information. Perhaps a priest would be more appropriate if absolution is what you seek.
So, Lynn, let's talk about the locked room mystery brought up in the summary we gave. What is it and how does it function in this novel?
It's an old form. Characters are confined together in a remote setting. All have motives: a secret affair, a lust for revenge of an old slight, a desire to inherit large sums. One by one, each person is mysteriously killed. How was someone able to enter the space where the crime occurred, murder his or her victim, and exit without leaving, seemingly, a clue? From popular examples such as Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None to the recent movie Knives Out, the formula of the locked room mystery has had staying power for decades for large audiences. There's usually only one way in and one way out of such rooms, by the way.
So in the novel, The Unmasking, what is the locked room, or where is the locked room?
In The Unmasking, the lodge itself functions as a series of locked rooms, with mysterious accidents and events occurring, and no one feeling that they can leave. There's a feeling of claustrophobia. Inside the lodge is a traditional locked room, a storage closet with no windows and only one door. But when it is opened, something surprising is inside, as we shall see in a few minutes. Another locked room is, in essence, the dean's car where he dies. But how was his death orchestrated, as he was by himself, and why? No one knows who and what caused his fatal accident until the pieces of the puzzle fall into place.
Miriam, in her keynote on the locked room mystery that she gives at the festival, puzzles through that exact crime. A crime that on the surface seemed like an accident, yet which was carefully orchestrated. Let's hear the end of that passage.
I ask you to contemplate a mind facile and arrogant enough to predict that an act of premeditated violence would appear 100 times out of 100 as just a bad break. Casual, unfortunate, just one of life's little surprises, like a slip on a slick staircase or a skid in the shower or a burst vessel in the brain. It was something that could happen to anyone at any time. But Alex's death would not have happened at any time, just at one, on a Friday morning at rush hour, in the 1-mile drive from the victim's home to his neighborhood grocery. Call it designer's delight. Call it devil's play. Call it the perfect crime.
We find out in your prior book that Miriam is a student of Sherlock Holmes, and we can see this in her lecture on the locked room.
Yes, she's fascinated by the perfect crime, which produces many clues, but goes undetected until someone very clever puts the pieces together.
If they do. The core of the novel takes place at the Oso Grande Lodge on the edge of the Gila Wilderness. I love that you set your locked room in a gorgeous wide open space. Much of the action happens within the confines of a Chautauqua festival. Tell us about those.
Originally, at the turn of the last century, Chautauqua was a movement that brought culture to small towns in America with lectures by famous people like Jane Addams of Hull House fame. These usually happened in the summer in large white tents. Now, scholar performers in costume impersonate famous people, presenting first a monologue as the person, and then they answer questions as that character. The Chautauqua is itself a kind of unmasking when the performer, after the monologue as the historical figure, takes off an article of clothing, for instance, a tie, a brooch, or a hat, to once again become themselves the actor, to answer questions in the present.
So Chautauqua performances can be seen as another kind of locked room, a play within a play, as it were.
Good point. Yeah. I like to think that each of the Chautauqua performances are like a door being opened. You get to turn a key and be in another world where different rules apply. And clues emerge of who is really underneath the costume and what their motives really are.
The Unmasking is very much about women's lives and women's rights. Victoria Woodhull is one of the women from history performed in the novel. Tell us about her.
Victoria Woodhull is the very first woman in the United States to run for president at the head of a major party, the Equal Rights Party. This was in 1872. We are now celebrating, as you know, the 100th anniversary of women's rights to vote in this country.
Is this one of the reasons you're happy the book is coming out this year?
Yeah. Yes. The focus on women's history this year makes the Women's Festival in the novel especially timely, particularly with the inclusion of Victoria Woodhull, who was so ahead of her time and not well known to readers today. Most people aren't aware, for example, that it was Woodhull who was the very first woman to address the U.S. Congress, not Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Susan B. Anthony, who are better known. She said in 1871, and this is quite amazing given our recent election, "The will of the entire people is the true basis of Republican government, and a free expression of that will by the public vote of all citizens, without distinctions of race, color, occupation, or sex, is the only means by which that will be ascertained."
It's fantastic. And it sure does resonate today as we celebrate our new VP, Kamala Harris. Women's lives are presented other ways in the Unmasking. For example, in Fiona's performance of Edith Wharton, she says, "Wharton was not the kind of political pioneer that Victoria Woodhull had been, yet she wrote again and again of the social strictures that strangled women's lives and potential."
As she listened, Bettina's mind seized upon what now seemed an old idea of women as commodities. Had Alec collected his wife Barbara because of her beauty and accomplishment? Edith Wharton had never wanted to be commodified. No wonder she had been captivated by the joke about her and Teddy Roosevelt as self-made men.
The phrase became a drumbeat in Bettina's mind as she attended to Fiona's pleasant alto voice. It reverberated with the very project they were all in Silver City to do, and that was to construct an identity beyond their own persona. How many women had craved or emulated the veneer of maleness?
The Me Too movement today continues the discussion about gender and power.
Sure does. Why don't we turn back to the mystery plot? The dead dean's wife, Barbara, is part of the festival in Silver City, New Mexico. She immediately becomes a target of suspicion, partly because she's inherited $3 million from Alex Insurance. It turns out that the festival's moderator, who plays the American writer Gertrude Stein, is Barbara's new lover. After Barbara has disappeared, Bettina, Miriam, and Vivian, Miriam's wife, gather for dinner.
The locked room mystery Vivian offers. I suppose that's just a metaphor for closed communities of every kind. Families, work environments, anywhere people are thrown together for any period of time. If people are stuck together, resentments can percolate. It's really a miracle more people don't do away with each other when you think about it. Bettina nods. Fortunately, most people worry about getting caught. That holds down the acting out of some of the rage and ill will.
A thought occurs to Miriam. What if each of us lives in a locked room? I mean, isn't that what our biased perception really is? Over time, each of us develops patterns of thinking and feeling. We learn to filter things in predictable ways. If we don't make an effort, we get locked into reacting by rote, responding to some stimuli and ignoring others. We don't let in new ideas or experiences.
You know, I keep thinking of Stein's only mystery, Blood on the Dining Room Floor, Bettina says. All those coincidences, deaths, things not working. Maybe that was true of Alec. He'd made a lot of mistakes, publicly wailed on people, had misappropriated funds, all of it. But what if none of that added up to why he died? I haven't wanted to admit this is possible. But what if the simple explanation is the right one? He crashed his car into a post. It could happen to anyone.
Well, yes, it could, Miriam concedes. But when someone has the air of desperation about him as he did, and for it to happen on the day of his annual gala, well, it seems like blood on the dining room floor. And now there's his wife. Barbara seems entirely too organized to simply disappear. Can't help but think that there's a plan behind this. Miriam sat back in her chair and contemplated the cold food left on the table. The carrots and potato had a greasy sheen on them, leaving clingings like thin tendons. Had that really been a roast beef before they'd fallen onto it? And prior to that, a breathing creature walking the earth? Death and decline were not just pretty things to look at. Boy, Lynn, you open the novel with the line, "I'm no longer young." Now you've given us this wonderful and horrible dead food. What's the connection? What were you thinking when you were in the writing of that?
Well, death is an expected part of the mystery novel. Bettina is afraid of her mortality as she turns 50 at the beginning of the book and says the line, "I am no longer young." One of my ideas in this book is to investigate the conventions of the mystery form itself, the isolated setting, the possible suspects, their public selves hiding their private motives. Part of the unmasking is the mystery of human personality.
So I think that leads to having both amateur and professional sleuths.
Well, one of the conventions of this kind of mystery is that there are both of those. So Bettina and Miriam and Fiona are amateur, and then there are the professional detectives. In this novel, there is Lieutenant Susan Crane, who also worked with Miriam in Death of a Department Chair.
Let's end with an excerpt from a scene where Miriam and Lieutenant Crane enter the locked storage room hoping to find the missing Barbara. They glided into the entry through the great room, which held only a large round table for the final festival's participants' dinner that evening, and into the small dining area by the kitchen. In that space, even the art on the hand-plastered walls, usually so bold in its design throughout the lodge, appeared tentative and hushed, as if waiting for something or someone. A simple pencil drawing of a horse alone in a field, a watercolor of a stream making its way along a road. Liminal zones, thought Miriam, places where people were not here or there, but on the way to becoming.
Lieutenant Crane put her ear to the door of the storage room. "Silence," she whispered. She waved Miriam forward. As Miriam laid a hand against the cool wooden door and listened, she too could hear nothing stirring inside. Slowly, Crane extended her hand and cradled it around the doorknob. Her face creased in strain. Impatiently, she brushed strands of hair off her forehead with the other hand, then tensed her arm and turned the knob. The door swung open. The storage room loomed in front of them like a black pit. If quiet could make a sound, the room echoed with emptiness. The detective moved ahead. Behind her, Miriam was startled to see a gun in Susan Crane's hand, leveled into the center of the room. The detective slapped the wall with her other hand and flipped the light switch. A fluorescent light in the ceiling cast its unrelenting glare on the table and shelves. Canned goods and old appliances, a small fan with a bent blade, a toaster, a tiny microwave, lined the shelves. The table was dust-free and empty. Nothing was on the scuffed wooden floor but an old pair of boots neatly lined up to the kickboards to the right of the door.
"Look!" Miriam pointed at the coat rack. Barbara's Mabel Dodge Lujan costume hung from one curved arm, limp, its black seeds, pearls glinting in the harsh light.
The two women edged forward. Pinned to the right shoulder of the gown was a white note with a single word typed upon it. "Goodbye."
At one point in the novel, Miriam says that perhaps we all get the locked room that we deserve. It's kind of a scary thought.
On this note, I think we better open up for questions.
Okay, I see that we have some, but I'll start. So, Lynn, you have a set of fictional women that you've spent a lot of time with, at least 2 novels, maybe more, right? As well as a group of historical women who you've written into your fiction and that you've portrayed on stage. How do those groups relate to one another, and where do you sit with those groups? What do they mean to you?
Well, I'll start with the last part. I've studied these women, not every single one of them as much as some, but I performed Edith Wharton and Gertrude Stein and Victoria Woodhull. And so I felt like I got to know them fairly well. And I'm a great admirer of them all. And then I've also taught Virginia Woolf. So they do mean a lot to me. I think that they're very remarkable women that we need to know something about, because their struggles are still our struggles. And then the early part of the question, why do people choose a certain character for Chautauqua? And I really think that we choose someone not just because we admire them, but because we think we can learn something from them. I know for myself that when I was writing a novel that actually did get published back in the early 90s, I chose to perform Gertrude Stein because I thought she had such a sense of ownership over her ideas, and she was such a strong figure. And in a way, it helped me to feel that I could be a writer somehow, performing her. So there's some kind of relationship that you form with somebody you perform. It's almost like they're a part of you and you're a part of them. It's kind of intriguing.
Fantastic. Okay. So these are questions from the group. What scene or part of this book was the most challenging to write, and which part brought you the most joy?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I think there's several parts that are challenging, but frankly, the middle of a novel is always very challenging to write, just because you feel very excited when you start and you've got an idea, and then you're kind of going toward the end. And when you get to the end, then you get excited again. Edith Wharton used to say that when she wrote a novel, that the beginning was like a walk in the spring wood and the end was like a night with a lover, but that the middle was like the Gobi Desert. So I did get kind of bogged down in the middle of the book. I had all these strands going and I had to keep them, moving crisply. And so that was very challenging. And then was another part of the question what I most liked? Was that?
Which part brought you the most joy? Yeah.
The most joy. Well, I love the friendship of these women. So I really love how they get together and think and talk. And there's numerous places in the novel where they're analyzing the crime. And that was fun to write. There's no question about it. And then I also loved writing about Barbara and Jane, the lovers in the book who are also portraying famous figures. They were just kind of deliciously fun to write, I have to say. Yeah.
They're fun to read. Next question is, were you interested in tarot before this novel? What kind of research did you do?
My first novel was called The Fool's Journey and had these characters in them, and it's structured according to the major arcana of the tarot. So yeah, I started reading cards many, many years ago. A friend bought me a deck in a used bookshop because apparently you're never supposed to buy your own tarot cards. And I started studying the cards. And because I love myth, I loved the tarot cards. So then when I decided to use the hero's journey for Fiona's coming of middle age story in The Fool's Journey, I read some classic books about the tarot. And then I had a backlog of experience of reading the cards to fall back on. But I did investigate more thoroughly the myths behind each of the major arcana cards, because they're really pretty rich in symbolism. So I did quite a bit of research for that book to make the tarot, weave in. And if you look at the cover of that book, there is a tarot card on the cover, among other things.
I saw a blurb that said your book included the theme of queer identity. Could you discuss how that theme appears in the book more?
One of the main characters, Miriam, is married to Vivian, and they have been together in all three of the books that are about these characters. And I think one of the strengths of having them in the book is that they have such a great relationship. And it's a very interesting and supportive marriage that they have. And so I think that that's kind of a positive thing. And then, of course, Gertrude Stein is one of the main historical figures in the book. And the woman who plays her is a lesbian who appears to, she's a very interesting person. The name of the character is Jane. And she plays this icon of lesbian identity, I think, Gertrude Stein, with such relish and aplomb, and also instructs the audience when she's performing that she cannot discuss her private life as Gertrude Stein's. But then when she becomes Jane again, she talks about why that would be in the 1930s when Stein was doing a tour of America, why she would never speak about her sexuality in public. So we get some history about the closet way back in the 30s and moving forward, how things have changed. So just exploring Stein and some of the things that she was up to, compared with the open easiness that Miriam and Vivian have in the book, is kind of an interesting historical panorama of that.
All right, this is not a question, but you all really need to get this book. I'm getting so much more just listening to you, Lynn. All right, going back to questions. Do you think the solo performances you've performed affect your writing or how you'd like to present scenes or characters? I think you touched on that earlier.
Yeah, these are all great questions. I feel like I really learned to write because I studied performance studies, and I early on started adapting fiction and poetry for the stage. And it really taught me how literature works, especially when I would adapt fiction. I really got to see, what are the through lines, because you can't, well, I guess you can with The Great Gatsby, which has been done in New York, but typically you don't perform a whole novel on stage in one sitting, right? It's too long. So you really have to decide what are the really important things to perform. What are the plot points you need? What are the character relationships? But most of all, it really taught me the importance of setting, and how on the stage objects can have power just as much as characters. So I think as a writer that I'm always conscious of what's going on in the room or the outdoors or wherever they are. I feel like I see it as a stage set almost. And I'm intrigued, where is the audience looking? Where do I want them to look? And what do I want them to see? And what might be lurking over on the stage right or stage left? So studying performance really helped me understand writing, and vice versa, I think. So maybe that's too long an answer, but certainly performance has made a huge difference to me in the sense of how do people sound? What do they look like when they can't speak? What is silence like? All those kinds of things.
Did your performances at Chautauqua or any particular experience there inspire this book? What were its origins?
Yeah, I was at a particular, well, when you do Chautauqua, you usually do it in a festival kind of thing. So sometimes you're on the road for 2 weeks with people that you're performing with. Other times it's just 1 week. But in any case, you spend a lot of time with those people. And I remember thinking one night very late after everybody had been performing and we ate a very late dinner and we were having a few drinks. I remember sitting there thinking, because there was lots of gossip going on, and I started thinking, this would be such a great setting for a mystery, is during a festival of performances like this, and someone just starts, acting out, and someone dies, etc. So I actually had that idea about 10 years before I started writing this book. But I kept thinking, wow, that would just be such a great atmosphere to have a murder mystery, because like the Gothic novel, these people are thrown together and they can't leave, which is the principle of many mysteries, that nobody can leave. They're stuck there until they're either killed or they figure out who's killing people. So it came out of being on the road.
The cover of this book is beautiful. It is. Could you talk to us about how it came to be?
Well, this is really interesting because after I'd written the book and the publisher was, doing the copy edits and all the stuff that they do, then the art department sent me a cover. And first they asked me, did I have a cover in mind? They always are courteous that way. Do you have an idea? And I did, but that wasn't my idea. I thought about, because this novel is so much about people and historical people, that I had an idea for a cover somehow showing the present and the past. That was one idea. And then I had an idea of a beautiful lodge in a bucolic setting, in the mountains, which is Silver City. So those were my ideas, but those were really literal, I guess. So then they just popped this cover at me, and I'm like, wow. And at first I didn't know what to think, but then I just fell in love with it because it's so metaphoric. And, the raven kind of evokes Poe, one of my favorites. And the whole concept of the unmasking with the head falling off and something else being underneath. I mean, I just thought it was a pretty amazing cover. And it's unusual, which I like. It doesn't look like any other cover. But it wasn't my idea.
Speaking of Silver City, here's a question from someone who I believe was just there. Why did you pick Silver City? What about Silver City inspired you?
Well, my wife and I go there a lot for R&R. It's a beautiful place. There is an actual lodge there that this is based on, and I got permission from the owners to use it in the book, and they were thrilled. So there's this fabulous lodge at the edge of the Gila Wilderness, which is the oldest wilderness in the continental U.S. It's, I don't know, it's something like 6 million acres or something. It's just this huge, gorgeous area. And within the area are some Puebloan ruins that are pretty amazing to see, the Gila cliff dwellings. Anyway, so I love the area. It's in southwestern New Mexico, very close to Arizona. And it's pretty isolated. You have to really want to go to Silver City. It's not easy to get to. I mean, it's not on a major highway. So I thought, what a great setting for a novel is people, stuck together in this lovely lodge for a period of time. And who knows what could happen there. So I chose it because I liked writing about the landscape there. And I liked the contrast of the beauty of the place and some of the ugly things that people do, as well as nice things that they do. But it just seemed like a great isolated setting. So.
Your book delves into the world of academia. What do you think are some of the biggest struggles for women in that world?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, having spent a lot of my life in academia, I can certainly speak to that. Academia is like the Gothic novel. It's a closed system. I mean, any university is. And there are people who've been there for decades. I remember my first job, I was in administration at Purdue, before I started teaching. And a lot of the people had gotten their BAs, their MAs, their PhDs, and they were working at Purdue. So it was like, not to single out Purdue as anything, but it felt like there was a code that I didn't know because I, popped in there for a job. So that's a struggle, I think, for women in what has been a patriarchal institution, the academy. Now that's opening up a lot. And certainly it started opening up in my generation. But even so, when I was an assistant professor, I was the only woman in my department for a number of years. And so it was sort of up to me to figure out, well, what are the codes of behavior here? How are things really done? I mean, here's how people say they're done, but there's another way that they're done. So kind of the difficulty for women is that often, unless you have a really good mentor, you don't really know what the informal rules are. And sometimes you violate those rules because you don't know what they are. You know what the printed up rules are, but you don't know how the business is really being done, which is, maybe at the faculty club over a scotch or something. It takes a while to figure all that out. So I think it's like any corporation where there is a hierarchy of power that you have to figure out. And because there have traditionally been fewer women, fewer people of color in these institutions or corporations, it's hard. I think it's hard to break in to the system or even to understand the system. So I had my share of political battles and difficulties and some struggles getting promoted to full professor and those kinds of issues, and some little battles with various people. So I certainly learned how to stand up for myself in academia, though, I have to say. So maybe that was a good thing.
I'll chime in just real quickly. I teach in a STEM field, and it's amazing to me women who are a generation younger than I am tell me stories about disrespect from colleagues, from graduate school advisors, and from students, current students who think, a woman in a STEM classroom is not the expert, that a man is seen as. Today, right? It's
still
shocking.
Happening.
Yeah.
And it is shocking. It's shocking to hear Victoria Woodhull in 1871 talking about things we are still struggling with in 2020. That is really like mind-blowing.
Yeah. What drew you towards writing mysteries above other genres?
Well, I do write in other genres, but I do love having a sense of mystery in, I think, everything I write. Some of my books are more traditional mysteries and others are not, but I love the opportunity the mystery form gives you, because you have sort of the surface order and then the criminal disorder. And that's just human behavior, right? I mean, we see that every day. So the mystery form is kind of an interesting way to create order out of disorder. So society has a veneer sometimes of civility, although lately not so much, but there are ways around that, and mysteries give you opportunities for playing with what is really happening under the scenes. What are the motives of the people? I'm very fast. I write plays too, and I'm really fascinated by motive. So I think maybe motive is what got me into mysteries. Plus reading millions of them as a kid.
Here's a classic question, I think. We'll see if you want to answer. What are you currently working on?
I can actually answer that. Phew, that's such a great thing. I have written a draft of a novel called The Surrogate, and I'm revising it right now. It's not traditionally a mystery. It's more of a family novel and a love story, but it does have a sense of mystery in it. One of the characters we're not sure what his motives are. Anyway, I've been working on that novel for about 2.5 years. And I'm very excited about it because it's a little bit of a departure for me. It's a little different from anything else I've written. So that's the main thing I'm working on. And then I'm also slowly accumulating enough short stories for a collection, but I'm not quite there.
I think that's our questions.
Wonderful.
Well, awesome. I want to thank both of you so much for joining us this evening. It was great getting to hear you read. And I was wondering while you were reading, I was like, you guys are so good at reading and you're so good at this. And then I was like, performance experience. I was like, my brain is now making sense of why she is so good at performing works of fiction.
Thank you.
Or you're just very naturally talented. It's probably both, to be honest. But it was really enjoyable getting to hear you read.
Well, thank you so much.
Of course, but thank you so very much to Francois for being our moderator for tonight, and Lynn for sharing your work that is not only a good classic mystery in some senses, but that is very much an on-point commentary on society and humanity in particular within the past couple years, and then also for pretty much all of its existence. It's something that when you were talking about how like our preconceived notions and our bias, they really do put us in our own box. And I think that concept in and of itself nails it on the head, and just bringing people awareness to be able to acknowledge that part about themselves, and that it's okay to acknowledge it, but acknowledge it and then you can work on it, I think is really, really amazing. So thank you so very much for joining us, both of you. Thank you to all of our awesome readers out there for coming in, asking questions, and that is
great questions.
Oh, yay! And don't forget, if you would like to purchase this awesome book, make sure that you click the button down there, and you can get a personalized book plate until 1 week from now. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Francois. Thank you, Constance.
You're
Wonderful.
welcome.